the skills and the leadership chops that you have from going through the military have application everywhere. You will make any team 5X. And this is exactly what I did on The Apprentice. I'd been out of the military for a long time when I went on the show, but Mark Burnett kind of cast me as the military guy. And I'd hate to go there, but like in The Apprentice, it's not like you have to get an A+ on the project. You just have to beat the other team, which means efficiency, good decision-making, no infighting, and that component in any situation typically wins. Not just in a reality show.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm AJ Pasciuti, a retired Marine, Force Recon, Scout Sniper, and Marine Gunner with 21 years of service, multiple combat tours, and a lifetime of lessons learned in the arena itself. On this show, I sit down with warriors from every front line to uncover what combat truly feels like and how it shapes the way we see life, each other, and ourselves. This is Combat Story.
Today on Combat Story, we're stepping into a different kind of fight, the transition from service to impact. Kelly Perdew is a West Point honor graduate, former Army intelligence officer, Ranger School and Airborne qualified, and winner of NBC's The Apprentice Season 2. After earning a JD and MBA from UCLA, he built and led companies and now backs extraordinary founders at Moonshots Capital. This conversation is about where veterans go and how their leadership continues to strengthen their business and society. This is a story about what happens when the mission changes, but the standard does not. This is Combat Story. Welcome back to the show, everyone. My name is AJ Pasciuti, and I'm here with my new friend, Kelly Perdew. Kelly Perdew was a West Point graduate, a Ranger School graduate as well, and a winner of The Apprentice Season 2, and now is one of the founder and CEO, if I'm not mistaken, of Moonshot Capital, if that's correct?
Co-founder, managing general partner, yes.
Oh, fantastic. So co-founder and managing general partner of Moonshot Capital. Really excited to enter into this new chapter of Combat Story where we get a chance to interview veterans of service and where they are at today and really to be kind of like a beacon on the hill to, kind of show what veterans are, what we can do and what we can bring to the table. So with that, I'd love to ask you kind of a first, opening salvo of questions is, okay, so I've read through your bio. I've had a number of conversations with you before the show. You are a pillar of success for the veteran community. And what I love about your journey is not only have you been extremely successful, but you're turning around and making sure not to pull the ladder up behind you. You're turning around and making sure that you can associate and help other veterans. So before we really want to get into this, I wanted to define one of the most principal moments that you can see in your life where you saw a leadership decision point or a moment for you where like, this is what leadership looks like, and this is how I want to be for the rest of my life. Was there a moment in time that you crossed, whether it be military service or after, that you faced that?
Yeah, I think, and AJ, I'm really happy to be here. I've been a long time listener and watcher of the podcast, and I love what you're doing and highlighting military veterans. The as part of the leadership training at West Point, we're taught you're going to get a whole lot of great examples and you're going to have a whole lot of bad examples. Kind of in the moment, remember these so that you can act the way that you think is the more effective way to act, and try not to act the way that you don't like being treated and doesn't look like good leadership to you. I was very fortunate to have, I was a direct report to Captain Andrew Hergenrother, who was the S2 for the brigade, 2nd Brigade at Fort Ord, the 7th ID. And he was the consummate expert. Ran marathons, so really a problem for my PT, right? So he was the long-term runner. And just encyclopedic knowledge, embraced the profession, understood that he was in a support and combat multiplier role, and really took that to heart. Like so many great officers, always focused on the mission, but thinking about the soldier. And I watched him operate that way. And then when I went to the MI battalion, my company commander and I was a CI platoon leader, counterintelligence platoon leader. Captain Bruce Fagerstrom, the amount of time, effort, and dedication he had to his lieutenants and developing them, right, professionally, socially, every from going, at lunch we'd go lift in the gym. It was like his team, and in both of those instances, while they were very different in their approach, super effective, and I'd hoped that I'd adopted over time how they were operating. And then at the actual brigade level, we had Colonel Linwood Burney, who was the highest ranking survivor and officer from Hamburger Hill in Vietnam.
No way.
An incredibly in shape, very serious individual. And definitely the hard ass. And in, I guess, peacetime, kind of the commander that everybody was a little afraid of and was difficult to work with. But in any wartime, that's the exact person that they wanted to be under their command. We're going to do it. So, a lot of different great examples in the military, and obviously out of the military, I've seen just, phenomenal examples of leadership. This became, kind of front and center for me after winning The Apprentice, the show The Apprentice. In the media aftermath, I'd been out of the military for a long time when I went on the show, but Mark Burnett kind of cast me as the military guy. So every one of my sidebar channels, the question was, well, how did your military background help you on this task? Or do you think your military background helped you on the show? And I got that question so much that it actually started to piss me off.
Really?
Because it was pretty apparent that people didn't understand the leadership training that you get in the military has application across your entire life, not just in a reality show. All of those principles come to bear in any type of business, right? In any type of your personal life. And I actually wrote a book called Take Command, 10 Leadership Principles I Learned in the Military and Put to Work for Donald Trump. That is, I think, the longest subtitle of any book.
It's pretty
the
good.
publisher wanted Donald Trump's name in it, and it's number 10 and everything else in it, right? So, but it's literally the fundamental thesis of Moonshots Capital. Like, we believe it is very, very difficult to build a startup, a technology startup. We know that to be true. My co-founder and I, another West Point grad, Craig Cummings, we have both done it, right? We've got 15 operating roles under our belts, successfully exited, failures, like the whole 9 yards, right? And when you look at who is successful in running that gauntlet, it is the people who've demonstrated extraordinary leadership capabilities. Authentically for us, military veterans fit the mark. So we have about, I think right now, $250 million of assets under management, invested out of 3 funds, syndicate vehicles, as angels, and about a third of the 128 companies we've invested in have military veterans as part of the founding team. And we, front and center, first thing is look for extraordinary leadership. So, it presents itself and adds value in a lot of ways. So when we're trying to win, AJ, you're a founder, you're previous Navy SEAL or a fighter pilot or whatever you happen to be. And you and I have a conversation, I'm looking to invest in your company. When we start the conversation, there's already a bar of trust and shared DNA and background that makes the conversation much more authentic and fast. And if I end up being the board member, like we win the deal and we invest money and I come onto your board, there's a chance that shared DNA means you actually have a higher trust for me than for your co-founders, because of that shared background and that shared trust. And one of the most important elements in these fast-moving, chaotic, crazy startups is speed of communication, speed to trust, right? Can we communicate? Do you trust me? I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. Like that really helps a lot. So yes, military veterans, a third of our deals have military vets, 2/3 don't. Like we don't have the monopoly on extraordinary leadership, but I know based on the background and can talk to former teammates, commanders, who you name it, soldiers that have worked with you. I can get a lot of really good data and feedback on you that I trust. And you can do the same thing about me.
I really like that. It's a really good ebb and flow, and a push and pull of information. And it probably comes from the background of being a counterintelligence officer, beforehand, is you like to know as much information about the people that you're working with. I really enjoy the fact that military service provides almost like bona fides, like at least opens the door for a conversation. We know that you've been through a certain gauntlet. We know that you have a certain level of performance associated with that. And that very much also there's this kind of like aspect of almost a shared journey. We know that there's a little bit of suffering that happens inside of the service. We know that there's hardships that are endured. And so I think, and I don't have a startup or I don't assess startups, but boy, if I'm looking for teammates, whatever that may be in the future, and I know that they can, or that they have overcome adversity. So here's a great example. So I was a force recon Marine. We had some challenges when I was in Afghanistan. We had members of an organization that wanted to join us on some pretty arduous missions. I have no issue with bringing attachments on missions, but my one issue that I had with my platoon commander, who was a Naval Academy graduate, by the way, but we had a conversation, and I said, Kevin, like, I'm happy to bring these attachments on the mission, but the challenge that I face is they're untested. Now, yes, they are Marines. Yes, they have qualified, but they're not reconnaissance Marines. And when we have a reconnaissance Marines, there's a very, very specific bar. And it's not that we have better hair or a faster runtime. It's that we have a certain level of suffering that we can go through. And we know that everyone's been through that level of suffering. So when it gets really tough out there, we all know that the baseline of what we're used to is way harder than what we're facing. Now, that did have some consequences later on. We did bring some attachments onto the mission, and we had some adversity. I know that you have a big storm kind of off the coast right now, but we had like sleet and hail and 40-mile-an-hour winds climbing a mountain.
Reindeer sunshine.
Yeah, we call that recon sunshine. You can't have that. That's ours. But we joke about that. But these guys were, like, hey, they're looking at me and they're asking that, me, the team leader, hey, I think we need to turn back. And I said, no way, man. If it's raining this hard, this means our enemy isn't moving right now. We are. And so I understand that kind of threshold. So if I may, what led you to want to join the service? And so you did go to West Point. So there was, like, if I can take back just a brief snippet into your early life and what led you to service in the first place.
Absolutely. So I'm parents were divorced very early on, went to live with my mother. And then high school's coming up, and I'm like, okay, typically when you go to college, you spent like 90% of your time with your parents that you're going to spend or more, right? So if I don't go live with my dad now, I won't know him as well as if I stay at my mom's. So I moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming from Sarasota, Florida, where my mom was. I moved to live with my father in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is very different weather, culture, terrain, like in Sarasota, Florida.
It may as well be the moon.
People move the other direction typically, right? Not that direction. But it was fantastic. I got to know my father, self-made man, successful real estate developer, and he believed that you make your own future, right? You're being a self-made, like, doesn't matter what school you're in, you're going to get the education you want to get, right? You're going to work hard, you're going to learn whatever it is. So he was willing to pay for me to go to the University of Wyoming in-state school, which would pay, if I had to pay full tuition, was like $500 a semester. But they would pay, I had good enough grades, played all the sports, did all the stuff you're supposed to be doing, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, all of that stuff. And I was like, well, if I want other opportunities, I'm going to have to earn those opportunities other than go to the University of Wyoming, which is a great school. Go Josh Allen. I'm a Broncos fan, so I didn't feel too bad. I felt a little badly for him, but we lost Bo Nix. So anyway,
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, how am I gonna figure out opportunities that exist out there? So I applied to a bunch of schools, and I talked to the guidance counselor, and we're near the Air Force Academy there in Cheyenne, Wyoming. But I was like, I don't want to fly jets. And this whole like leadership focus, the, established in 1802, the MacArthur's, the Pattons. And I wasn't like a military buff, but everybody knows of those names and the history. And it seemed to a kid in Cheyenne, Wyoming, kind of this romantic, faraway place it just does a whole lot of really neat stuff. So our crosstown rivals, when I was a junior, their keynote speaker for their graduation was the lone representative, the House of Representatives, because Wyoming only has one. The reason I was so good in sports is because there were only 400,000 people in the state. So I went over and at the other school, the bad school, we were at Cheyenne Central, that was Cheyenne East. I went to their graduation, and Dick Cheney was the lone representative from the great state of Wyoming. So I introduced myself and said, "Sir, I'm going to try to get an appointment from you. I want to introduce myself." I got an appointment from him the following year.
Really?
To go to West Point.
Really?
So
That's
I was
crazy.
independent, right? I need no money from my parents. So it's paid for with, the future payment of 5 years of service. And it's paid for. And I was off to this, being able to serve this unbelievable historical place that had amazing leaders go through it. And when you go and look at what you actually get to do, it's a phenomenal educational experience. You cannot miss a class, right? 15 to 20 cadets in a class, somebody's missing, and they're not like in the hospital. Everybody gets up and goes to find them. You're AWOL, and they come find them. So think about a college experience where you're not allowed to miss a class.
A little different than the norm.
You're going to learn more, right? You necessarily got to learn more, right? But there are a whole bunch of components to it. It really is a spectacular educational experience. And I took full advantage of all the different opportunities. I went to cadet troop leadership training on the Fulda Gap in West Germany. This is before the wall came down, looking across the Fulda Gap at Soviets, tanks, the planned time was to be a speed bump. He'd last about 60 seconds to 90 seconds to try to slow down the onslaught going to the river, right? I did a VST program in the House Armed Services Committee. And because I had a top secret security clearance, I got to sit in the markup hearings on the Hill. That was another summer. I did an exchange semester at the Naval Academy. So maybe I ran into Kevin. I don't know. But we go and you keep your uniform from your home school, and you exist at in the enemy's grounds leading up to the Army-Navy game, and I was part of the. So I would say I took full advantage of all the experience that existed in that environment, and it was I still think, and looking, and my twins are 16 years old, boy girl. The girl seems interested potentially, but I literally am trying not to push it all. If you decide to go that route, it has to be based on what you really want inside, not because you're doing it for others.
I really like that. It's this component of, again, self-determination, right? And having to be able to like lean into something. If you were to force them, then they may not have the same, that would be external motivation, right? Instead of intrinsic motivation. And especially when you're facing those arduous pieces, as a sniper, I think a lot about trajectory. And I think that what I can tell so far about your story, and again, reading about you, and as I get to learn more about you, is it seems like you already had a good head on your shoulders. You were already what I describe as a rocket ship, right? People that are just really, really motivated to keep moving, in an upward trajectory. It seems like that West Point, going to a service academy really helped to be able to kind of shape a lot of that, as far as what you're talking about, and set you up. I mean, one, I think that walking up to a House of Representatives member and telling them that you're going to seek their, endorsement, it takes a lot of stones. And so I think that you already had a lot of that, right? That's really cool. It's really brave of you. And I really like how it seems like West Point cultivated that and said, we're going to put you and we're going to expose you to so many different facets of life, sitting on the House Armed Services Committee or cruising around the Naval Academy. These aren't normal experiences for a college student. And so it's almost, you're getting this like master class in leadership and an exposure as you're going through in your formative years, and then being able to kind of step off on your journey and now pay back the service by being, an active duty officer afterwards. That's really, really a fun story.
I will say that you don't always know who you're impacting or influencing. Like for everybody who's listening, so I have 4 younger siblings, and again, nobody in my family had ever gone into the military. My my next youngest brother decided to go to the Naval Academy. I consider him incredibly intelligent, so he must have been taking notes and hearing like upstate New York, Highland Falls, standing on the plane in the winter versus Annapolis, where the town's right outside, there's bars and women and everything else, right? So he must have been paying attention. So
Maybe not that.
he graduated. Yeah, he graduated from the Naval Academy. My middle brother did not do any military service as energy trader. The next brother, the fourth brother, enlisted in the Navy, retired as a chief, and now works in healthcare industry. And then the youngest brother, Boston College, Army ROTC, 100 missions in Iraq, 30 firefights, brought his whole platoon back.
Wow.
And it went to Fidelity to trade credit for years and is now in an entrepreneurial role. So I won't say they did 3 of the 4 others, so 4 of 5 went because of me, but it certainly opened their eyes to that opportunity. And I think my mom probably wasn't as excited about it. I think at one point in time, 3 of us were in active duty. Only one of us saw combat. I did not ever deploy into a combat zone, but was on alert at the 7th Infantry Division for 2.5 years of Desert Storm.
Right. And you mentioned Fort Ord, right?
Fort Ord. And for the younger listeners, there was something called a pager. It's like a cell phone. All of that is vibrate with phone number on it. We had a 2-hour recall. We had to be ready to go wheels up in 18 hours. So one third of the time you were off, and 2 regiments in a brigade rotated. 2 of them were on alert at all times.
So you mentioned early on Ranger School. Did you go to Ranger School while you were is it cadet? Is that the right term? While you're at West Point?
Yeah, at West Point, cadet, graduate, commissioned as a second lieutenant. So I selected military intelligence as my branch, and Fort Huachuca is the MI, Military Intelligence Officer Basic Course. And while at the Officer Basic Course for military intelligence and thinking about and looking at, okay, my job is to be very smart about the enemy, the battlefield, the terrain, understand exactly where everything's going, and provide information, intelligence, advice based on all the different data points coming in to the commander so that he or she can make the best decisions on what to do with the troops, try to accomplish the mission. And I'm like, all right, there's always 3 slots available for Ranger School at MIOBC because no one takes them. And if you're an infantry officer, you have to get tabbed. You have to get Ranger tabbed, or you're not getting promoted, past first lieutenant. So there's a line, and you better not get recycled, and you hope, you got to pass, right? So I'm like, if I'm going to be an effective advisor to that combat arms CO, I think that if I understand, as you were saying before, they weren't quite at they weren't at the same bar as your Marine recon training and understanding. If I have a Ranger tab, I will have experienced, understand, and know what it means to hump an 80-pound rucksack with a mortar base plate across that mountain range. Yep. And then, how prepared to fight am I going to be? And how cold is it? What's it look like through desert, mountain, swamp phase? It's a nightmare. And I can't begin to imagine what being in combat would be like. Many of my friends have, and some of them describe that they wake up in cold sweats of nightmares about Ranger School. Because it's a forced 67 days at a minimum, no food, constant stress, you're hallucinating. It's definitely an exercise that shows you that the weakest muscle in your body is right between your ears.
I love that. And I love that I think because what you can do is after you graduate something that arduous, there are certain schools in the military, and it's an interesting kind of culture. There are some schools in the military that are kind of supposed to punch you in the gut, right? And I mean, yes, you learn a lot while you're there, but sometimes they're just supposed to be a gut punch. And I think that that's really valuable for, not knocking people down, but again, establishing this baseline of like, I know what it's going to be like to suck this bad and how much this is going to hurt. And anything else after that is just benefits, right? Like, hey, I'm good, right? Yeah, I know that I can make that through. So, okay, so
Well, I can tell you, hiking's not very much interesting. Like, no longer was interesting to me. Like, hiking's not a thing. No, no. And believe it or not, Maslow's hierarchy of food, shelter, it's absolutely correct. Like, I do not like to be hungry. I like swore to myself during that because I went from like 165 down to 135. And at like 5'11" and a half, right? I wasn't quite 6 foot, but I mean, I was like, a female supermodel sizing, right? Like, so it being hungry for a long period of time does things to you.
it introduces a person to themselves, and I think that being able to come out on top of that. So you went to Fort Huachuca for your training, had the opportunity to go to Ranger School during that time frame, and then get stationed at Fort Ord in Monterey
Yes,
area?
correct. My first duty station assignment was Fort Ord, Monterey, California. So the way it works, at least at the academies, and I'm not familiar on the ROTC side, but probably similar. Um, Based on your rank in the class, this is like opposite world of most colleges, right? Every week you're ranked 1 to 1,300, or then 1,200, and then 1,100, and then 1,000, and then 900 as the class winnows away. But you're ranked. There's an algorithm of academics, military, physical, sports and PE, and that combined algorithm gives you your score weekly. And so when it's time to select branches, they go to the number. There's X amount of branches available for West Point, and there's X amount of branches available, like of each branch, right? And they just go, number one, what branch do you want? Number two, and you just take branches until the last person, whatever's left over is what the last person gets. And then in your
Really?
branch, there's X number of duty station slots. So Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, Vicenza,
Hey.
Italy, Monterey, California. But then you also have Fort Polk, Louisiana, Fort Drum, upstate New York, where I don't even know what the temperature is today. It's probably completely frozen to block.
Not warm,
So,
yeah.
so then inside your branch you pick. And so I did have a high rank in class to go to Fort Ord. And my first address at a permanent duty station as a second lieutenant was in Carmel, California. I shared a house with two other lieutenants.
Oh,
in Carmel.
jeez. Yeah, we call those lieutenant mansions. They all kind of pool their money.
It's like being in the Navy, right?
Yeah,
San Diego.
I love it. Carmel, dude, that's fantastic. This was probably too Clint Eastwood wasn't the mayor yet, right? That was a little bit later
Right.
on. I know that
just a little bit later. But the Hog's Breath Inn, right down the street from where we lived, literally.
Dude, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So how long were you at Fort Ord? Did you move to any duty stations after that, or was Fort Ord the sole duty station?
No, you mentioned too that Fort Ord had closed. So Bill Clinton in 90, 91, 92 was doing the base closures for reducing the spend, and Fort Ord was on the list. But the Army, like all of DOD, now DOW, did force projections for calculating who was needed, and they offered early outs to the classes of 89 and 90. I was class of 89. So fill out this form, and you can get out next summer. And I had already taken an LSAT and a GMAT for the law school and the business school for graduate school. And so I filled it out, got out, and started law and business school program at UCLA. 2 months after, I got out in June or July, and then started in August at the law school at UCLA.
So what made you choose UCLA, and why do you regret not going to USC? I'm just joking.
So again, necessity is the mother of invention, and the in-state tuition for a UC school was about a quarter of private schools.
Fair.
I did apply to Stanford, and this is before there was email. Again, for all you younger listeners, you had to write something on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and send it. And I think somehow Stanford got me my dean letter on the same day I mailed it to them. I don't know how they did that, but it was a fast no. Somewhere at Stanford. And
Like a preemptive strike. They're like,
yeah, exactly. Like we hear you're interested. We're not interested. So I started wanting to understand the law and potentially become like a corporate attorney. And as I got to know the entrepreneurs in the business school, and my father was an entrepreneur on the real estate side, it was in my blood, and it just pulled me into it. So I shifted all my coursework on the law side to things like contracts and bankruptcy, things that have full application to the business versus constitutional laws and property law and that stuff. And really started focusing on and raised money for the first startup in the second year of the 4-year degree and started a startup. And instead of having a Acme company be my business for the business class, I actually used my company, ImageTel.
Yeah, I love the practical application on that. Yeah, and that was really fascinating to read. Was there an identity shift that you had to go through when transitioning from service to being? So you had a West Point, you had a very military, undergraduate, and now that you're going, as an MBA candidate at UCLA. What were the differences? Did you have to have a shift in your perspective or your personality? What was that identity shift like?
So I think one of the biggest complexities around the transition was verbiage, nomenclature. Like everybody in business school had 2 to 5 years of business experience, right? And my business experience had been, the BIC, assistant S2 for a brigade. And a counterintelligence platoon leader. I'd had 30, senior enlisted and warrant officers who do 3 languages and had masters in criminal whatever, right? That I was my infantry brethren were doing more push-ups on their guys to impress them. And I had to explain why we were doing the mission to the
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 10-pound brain guys.
I mean, they're 15 years older than I am and shoot brilliant and everything else. So it was a different challenge. But the business school piece was I didn't know what accounting was. I didn't understand marketing. All the primary functions and roles, it was all Greek. It was a brand new language that I didn't know anything about. So I was really behind from that standpoint. But from a time management, I'd been at West Point. There is no free time. And there's 18 to 24 credit hours a semester. It's overload compared to a regular schooling program. The academies are all like that. It's and then your free time, you're drilling or you're playing this. Literally, is a free time. And you're trying to figure out how to fit an impossible amount of things to do in a very limited amount of time. So when I got to grad school, that's supposed to be hard, I was done with everything by 3 p.m. every day.
Because you're taking that same work ethic, that same thing. You're like, okay, I'm back in college.
I'm going at it, learn it, and now let's go play, or let's start a business. Or let's start a business, or let's do this. I'm free, ish, I can do different things I want. So I really embraced that, and I became really clear that I did not. The law side was, I don't want to say mental gymnastics. Very, very smart people, but the real exciting part in changing the world instead of being fighting, the legal side, unless you're wills and trusts or, intellectual property. And I didn't have a high tech background to apply from the legal side for IP. It was so much more creative and building, and that entrepreneurial, bite, I had it from my dad or from that environment. And the Anderson School at UCLA has a phenomenal entrepreneurial program. So, there were not many, if you go to Harvard or Stanford, you see a lot of academy grads. You see West Pointers and Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, but there are very few that were in the LA ecosystem. So it wasn't I had role models to follow to figure out how to do that transition. But again, I was very keep as many doors open as possible, hence 2 degrees, hence learn and do as much as possible. So I just kept like trying to figure it out. And that's when, while I was building those first companies, I was also meeting other entrepreneurs in the LA ecosystem and started to understand what made good ones, how they operated, like how do you get funded, how do you do business development deals, how do you structure deals. And some of my law background helped, but I made the decision not to take a bar exam so that I would never be able to fall back on taking $100+ grand a year job.
I think that from a pragmatic standpoint and from like an economy of motion standpoint, it seems like, and I love the idea of while you're going through business school, you're working on, building your own startup or kind of going through and raising money. And so now the practical application phase of school is now you're not, like you said, you're not building it on Acme company. You're doing it on something that you actually have heart, you have a general desire for, and you're pushing towards a specific direction. Can you take me through some of the early or the formative years of where you were kind of developing this company, at the same time as going to school? How were you able to kind of correlate the lessons that you were receiving in class and then being able to put them into real world, application?
Well, it's very difficult to conceptualize and learn everything from the books. And that's one of the reasons they typically require you to have been in business for a while in some sort before you go to business school, so that you can bring either domain expertise or, what have you from your walks of life. Maybe you're in finance, maybe you're in marketing. So when you're on a team, you're providing that marketing expertise. And there's maybe somebody else that's a finance person. So when you do a group project, everybody can contribute from their own domain or expertise.
Sum of all parts.
So my domain of expertise was ensuring it got done on time, making sure everybody was doing their stuff they were supposed to be doing.
There's an efficiency to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and because I was not an expert at finance. I was in fact the opposite from all of those standpoints. So people did love having me on their team because I ensured everything got delivered on time and under budget. And it's one of the things I think twice a week I've got give back calls where I'm talking to a military vet that's transitioning or somebody who's trying to, is looking for a gig. I take up 2 30-minute calls a week. And there's lots of inbound for that, but I'll take 2 of them. And I think there isn't enough confidence because it is scary to not know the language, to think, I don't understand how finance and marketing work together. I don't get like how business development, how does somebody go out and create a deal with another company? What does that even look like? How does it work? And it's okay. You do have to learn that over time for whatever you want your deep expertise to be in. But the skills and the leadership chops that you have from going through the military have application everywhere. You will make any team 5x. And this is exactly what I did on The Apprentice. And I hate to go there, but like in The Apprentice, it's not like you have to get an A+ on the project. You just have to beat the other team. So the number one reason I won every one of my tasks, 4-0 as a project manager, and then I kind of project managed when I wasn't, because I can control the spreadsheet and told everybody what to do and made sure, because you just have to beat the other team, which means efficiency, good decision making, no infighting, and that component in any situation typically wins.
When there's a lot of different personalities and everyone's got the good idea fairies are kind of going on, if you've got a quarterback that can pull it and say, okay, what I love about military efficiency at specific points is we can kind of like close the door and say, okay, the good idea fairy is dead. We are now going to work towards execution, right? We've got all the things in here. And I think having the wherewithal, I talk with a lot of veterans. Myself, I went through what's called the Masters of Business for Veterans at USC. And what I loved about their program was it was half, it was very much an MBA. It was in half the time, because what they did was they recognized the previous performance, the leadership acumen, those kind of pieces. And then what they did was they bolted on the vernacular. and they bolted on the lessons, and and that was really strong for us. And to that point, what you mentioned is we all know that USC is kind of a cult, but they're very good at bringing the veteran dynamic to the LA area, and I think that it's helping. UCLA has been a really good partner with it as well, to start helping other veterans in that specific ecosystem. Because as you said, a lot of guys, I have a lot of friends that are SEALs or Green Beret, whatever it is. They all go to Stanford, they go to Harvard, that's kind of the next right step,
Brand.
in the
Good
yeah,
brand.
yeah, very much, right? And so I like how LA has that ecosystem of bringing back a lot of veterans, because I think it's very, very powerful. So,
Yeah,
okay,
I've been back to UCLA probably a dozen times to speak to they had embraced in the last 15 years, started to embrace military veterans, special programs, summer programs, you name it. And the MBA classes have a lot more vets in those classes, both the full-time and the executive programs. So I've been able to speak to them and talk to them, and either about venture capital and or my transition like we're talking about now. So it's definitely a more open ecosystem.
when I was transitioning, was the scariest move was one, what I had to kind of fight with was what I call ego death, was leaving the service. I had done 21 years and was enlisted, was eventually commissioned as a chief warrant officer, and did all the cool, whatever it is. And then I leave the service and people don't know what that is. They don't generally care too much, right? So I'm like, I walk into a room when I'm in the military and people are like, "Whoa, okay, my accolades are on my chest or on
Yeah,
my collar."
exactly.
And then you walk
You're
into a work.
defined. You're
Yeah,
defined.
yes. And then you do it in the civilian sector and you're like, "Hey, that's AJ. He was a Marine." And they're like, "Okay." Right.
Ugh.
And yeah, exactly. Right.
I've seen you on a movie before.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's kind of the scope. And so again, thank you so much for what you're providing for us. There's so much context of what we can be, and providing the example to other veterans of saying like, okay, I can get to this place. There is a space for me. Sometimes for us, it's just visualization of knowing that it can happen, to be able to kind of, break through that mold. Okay, so when I went through my program, I had a very good, he was our entrepreneurial, our entrepreneurship professor. What he said to me that really resonated, and he says, a lot of people like to say that they're entrepreneurs, and that's totally fine. He says, but the time that he realized he was an entrepreneur was the moment, and they were starting a business, and he was telling us this long story. He said, it was Friday, and my payroll was due, and I didn't have enough money to pay for my staff. Like that was like, can you take us through a moment of when you're like, okay, I'm early in this thing and the wheels are about to fall off before I can leave the runway. And how did you get through that?
So we call those learning experiences. um, Grandpa said, you get wire brushed
Yeah.
in those situations. I think probably a few gunny sergeants said that too. So I have a lot of those memories. That first company that I started while I was in the JD MBA program, I remember it to this day. I was at a Ralph's in West Los Angeles, and I had filled my cart up. That's a grocery store in the Southwest. I don't know where they are. It's like a Kroger, whatever, Ralph's. And I'd had I got my dozen cans of tuna, my 2 big boxes of, 20 ramen packages each, living on, rubbing pennies together, try to make nickels. And I went to the the cashier rang everything up, and I put my card in and, sorry, sir, it's declined. And I was, I don't know, 3.5 years of school debt. Credit card was at like 30 or 40. I couldn't have had it much higher than that then because I wouldn't have the credit. But I, I, I was tapped, right? And I had done one summer internship with a company called Deloitte and Touche, Deloitte Consulting. And they had made me an offer, but I wanted to do this startup. So I kindly said, no thanks. And so I had to, with my tail between my legs, call the managing partner from the Los Angeles office and say, hey, that offer that you made me like last summer? Could you make it 30,000 signing bonus, and I'll start tomorrow. And they did.
Really?
And so I paid. It took me about 18 months of working at Deloitte, gaining skills, really important. Excel, QuantJock, PowerPoint, a lot of different things that you don't need as much of with all the AI coming on, but you still skills. You don't have all the time in your life to learn skills, so learn it when you have the opportunity. And when I got back in the black financially, went off to my next startup. So,
Fantastic.
In that time, I also stopped working out leading up to that Ralph's visit. I stopped talking to the woman I'd been dating, stopped seeing my friends. And one of the things that I truly work with our founders that we invest in now from the venture fund is for them to pay themselves first. It doesn't, founders mode exists. That's not a new thing. That's not the Jensen, comment. Every real founder is trying to crush it. Like they really are. That's what you want to find. But you can frequently, like, not working out, not eating well, not caring for your family and your other relationships actually makes you not able to go as far. It actually hurts you from performing. So when you got to be a little crazy to be a founder of a company, and you want that, right? But you got to regulate it some so that you can it's a marathon. It is not a sprint, and it feels like a sprint for years. It feels that way, but it was really a marathon. So I promised myself then that I would always stay in shape after that, so that I wouldn't ever, and I would not, completely disappear on friends and family and everything like I did. So that was a big learning experience
So how did you, let's talk about The Apprentice just for a moment, right? So how did that come up, or where did that come up in your journey? So now you're at Deloitte, if I'm kind of tracking time, you're at Deloitte, you're, hopefully you said you're in the black, but now you're moving to your second startup. Where does The Apprentice fit into the picture?
So Mark Burnett is the producer for The Apprentice and Survivor and a whole bunch of other stuff. That man's a genius. He, in addition to doing the great big casting calls, like in the city where Trump would go and there'd be lines around the block and it would be a marketing event of its own to try to prep for the next season, they did closed casting calls at all the business schools in LA, USC, Marshall, UCLA, Anderson, Loyola.
Really?
Because they're like, we need some people that aren't full characters that make it fun to watch. And so I had moved to San Diego for a year. I got through the LA Anderson School alumni. Hey, there's a casting call for The Apprentice, next Thursday at school. And I'm like, it's an hour up there. It's too delete. And my next youngest brother, the Naval Academy, he went to Anderson years after I did. He got the same email in Florida, forwarded it to me, and said, Kelly, you have to go do this. And I'd never seen the show. I didn't see the show. So I went, I was like, all right, fine. So I went and sat in I walked in late, the door slammed, everybody's looking up there. Everybody's like every other seat filling out a form, and the casting crew's up front. It's one of those corner hall amphitheater things, right? Like that down in front. So I walk up and I'm talking to them, and I just stand up with them, fill out the form, like leaning on the stage. And I acted a little bit of a smart ass. I answered questions a little aggressively, and they moved us into a room, 10 of us in each room with a casting agent. And she said, I'm going to ask you all questions. They had our papers like right in front of her, and we're sitting, and everybody's in suits. And I'm going to ask you all questions, and I want you to answer honestly and talk about it amongst yourself. And then I'll throw in a new question every now and then. And she started off with, so what do you think of women in positions of power in business? And the guy to my right was going strong and hard and long with a politically correct answer. Like, I think everyone deserves to be treated fairly on their first time. And he went for like 30 seconds, which is 10 people is and so I did wear my ring knocker West Point ring. I slammed it on the table and said, that's the biggest bunch of that I've ever heard. Every woman I know in a position of power in business will eat her young. And like this guy's like this, some guy like spits up his drink. The woman closes her mouth kind of like what I did that a couple more times in that half an hour, just here and there. And then on the way out, she like tugs on my sleeve and says, "Hey, we want to bring you back in for a call back."
So
2 days later, I'm in a room with a Betacam, the Sony Betacam, real professional camera, the 2 casting agents in a 5x5 room for an hour and a half. They're filming me, asking me, what would my old girlfriend say about me? Who's your favorite character of all time? Like everything you could think of, like all sorts of questions for an hour and a half. And at the end, they're like, we want to put you into the, head casting agent to go on to be a contestant.
really?
And they said, you have to fill out a online application. I was like, you just hour and a half. Like,
Yeah, I feel like we're done at this point.
and they're like, no, it's a law. You have to do it. You have to be submitted. Like everybody's the same, submitted and everything else. So I had to make up a 2-minute video to Donald Trump about why I wanted to be his apprentice. So I went, this one's still somewhere in the wild. I don't know where this video is, but I did like the shirtless push-ups by the pool. I went drinking in Temecula out I did all sorts of stuff for this video. So
Product differentiation, right? Yeah.
that has not reappeared. I don't know where that video is. But one day when I'm running for office or something, right? So they said, hey, come to the DoubleTree in Santa Monica. Plan to be here for 3 days. There were 100 of us, every room filled, 50 men, 50 women, and they were picking like 9 each. It's from everywhere, right, for this thing. And for 3 days, we went and do a personality test, an IQ test, talk to a psychologist, do all this stuff. And I knock on my door, come with it. That's how they would come get you one at a time. You weren't allowed to talk to anybody. This is like a huge,
like a selection.
FTC. It's an FTC thing. I think they had an old show, quiz show, where there was collusion and they were stealing and people colluded to win. So there's all these rules now, and I can't do anything. So I go up and Burnett's sitting in almost like a Game of Thrones chair in the penthouse with all the producers around, and I'm sitting there, and he starts giving me a hard time. He's like, because he was military. He's like, and I don't do a British accent, but he's like, man, you're almost 38 years old, and it doesn't seem like you've really done a lot with your life. And he was like ragging on me, and I was like, I don't need this, Mark. I'm out of here. And I turn, and he's like, no, I'm just with you. You're in. Everybody starts clapping and laughing and everything else. So 2 days later, I fly to New York, and it's 7 weeks, lockdown, no phone, no ID, no money, no anything. You're just back to back to back challenges.
Really? I mean,
And
that must
this
have been
is
the
where
experience. Yeah, it must have been
the
an experience of a
military-
lifetime. Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm 38. I've been through Andrew School in West Point, and I've been in a talk with a commander breathing down my neck. And Donald Trump is supposed to be scary or make me nervous.
Right.
Or, okay, I've got to do a task and then not sleep much and do another task. And, you're filming
You're like,
me. I don't,
Am I getting fed through this? Okay, sounds great. I can handle that.
I've got pretty good food, actually. And I got 5 hours of sleep. What is
Yeah, right. This
So-
sounds great. Let's keep pushing.
So the civilians were dropping like flies, flying off the handle, losing it. The women didn't have makeup artists, so they had to do their own makeup because we were on film the whole time. And you're literally being recorded at all times. There is a mic on you. Even when you're asleep, there's a mic. When you go in the shower, there's a boom mic. So there's no way they want to capture every single sentence, moment, everything. There's no camera when you're in the head.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And then I think after halfway through the first season, the women realized that it's kind of translucent, the shower stall. So you have to put because you can see shapes and colors and stuff. So you have to put the towel over. So it's full transparency of everything. And most people cannot survive for, 24 hours, much less 6 or 7 weeks, not saying what they feel out loud or not realizing that it's a game within a game within a game. And so it was kind of runaway. The finale was 11 people in the audience were asked who, and it would pick me. And they stopped doing that after that season because it was so much of a runaway.
Well, I love that I think you were almost, because of the austerity that was provided on set that most people don't see. I think that this is where you had a real leg up, right? Of just understanding that, again, that baseline that we talked about is you have that baseline. You're like, this is relatively normal for us. Not maybe not normal, but this level of austerity, the level of stress at a constant high state. Like it's not cake, but this is normal. It's like thinking when you're under physical duress, right? It's like I've already preconditioned to that place.
There were no wait a minute vines from Florida swamps ripping into your skin at 2 a.m. while you're hallucinating, seeing a blonde selling hot dogs in the clearing. Right? None of that was happening. It was following.
I completely understand that. And that's a really good perspective too. And one of the things that a lot of veterans have as their kind of armor is they just have this level of stuff that they've gone through that sets the bar up. I really do appreciate that. So, and again, congratulations. I don't know if it's been said in a while, but congratulations on winning The Apprentice. I mean, regardless of anything that's happened since, like it's not easy to do, especially in those circumstances.
It was a lot of fun. It was a long time ago, and then the 15 months after that of being in Manhattan and being around him and the environment and watching him operate and his marketing mastery and attention to detail and watching his kids, full professionals working just as hard as everybody else. There's no silver spoon attitude. They're the real deal, as everybody's seen over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I really see that, and that's we don't touch really any politics in this, but I really do enjoy how you're talking about the internal workings of that, right? And how you're saying as an organization, as a business acumen, did that help shape you? Because you worked there, said for 18 months afterwards, after winning The Apprentice, you got to work inside the organization.
I stayed 15 months. It's 12 months is what you kind of win. You win the game show, and you get 12 months of pay. Your winning is paid 1/12 a month for 12 months. And I picked Manhattan, and I learned a lot about real estate and worked with his consigliere. George was the guy from the show, the older gentleman who'd been with Trump forever and traveled with Trump periodically. I also had, 60 plus speaking engagements, wrote a book on leadership, hosted a show on the military channel called GI Factory, one season. And I learned what producing a show without a significant budget is like versus being Motel 6 and
Cantuna again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's not really a budget for lunch.
Yeah.
So it was really a phenomenal. I think what I say, people get like 15 minutes of fame in their life, and I think I had 15 months. Was pretty amazing. And his longevity, his extended mind in terms of awareness and access and everything else.
So I guess, so then after this, so now that you leave, so let's say you've finished up with the organization, you've said you ran a show for a little while. How did you decide what the next chapter looked like? And like, it seemed like you had the world kind of at your fingertips. You have a really good resume builder. At the time, we don't have a ton of internet shows. Podcasts aren't a thing. So The Apprentice season 2 season finale has 30 million viewers. You kind of have the world at your fingertips. How do you decide where do you want to go next?
So I made a conscious decision during the 6 or 8 weeks that we had before, like the finale, the decision is live. So we did the final boardroom arguing, going back and forth, this, that, and the other thing. And then everything just stopped. It was like in the summer.
Yeah.
Literally, like pull the walls away. Everybody's like, okay, well, see you later. You can't, reminders of you're contractually not allowed to say anything about anything, right? And then the show starts in a few months live, and in the fall, and people are like, oh my God, and nobody knew I was on it. So now I'm like sitting in LA in the winter, the show is on, and people are so confused about how to deal with it. They're like, aren't you supposed to be there? And it's like, there's a whole week between episodes. I mean, no, there's no time between episodes.
Sure.
For me, at the time,
yeah,
it was literally back to back to back. That's why everybody got so
burnt out.
Getting older hits you in these little ambushes you don't see coming. One day you wake up and the knees sound like you're stepping on a bag of pretzels. Recovery takes longer than the workout itself, and the hairline, well,
it starts its own retrograde operation. I've felt all of that, especially after years of wear and tear overseas and in training, which is exactly why I'm obsessed with Bubs Naturals. Not because someone handed me a script, but because it actually helped me feel like I took some ground back. Most people don't realize this, but somewhere in your mid-20s, your body quietly starts producing less collagen every year. And collagen is basically the connective tissue of your life. It keeps your joints moving, your skin healthy, your hair and nails strong. Once it drops, you feel it. Bubs collagen peptides have been a way to rebuild some of what time, and in my case, the Marine Corps took out of me. My joints hurt less, recovery feels cleaner, and even small things like nails and skin look healthier. It's not magic, it's just replacing what your body stopped making. And it couldn't be easier. I throw 1 scoop into my morning coffee, it dissolves instantly. No grit, no taste, no weird science experiment texture, just coffee that happens to make me feel noticeably better. But here's where Bubs is different from every other supplement company out there. The entire brand is a tribute to Glenn "Bub" Doherty, a Navy SEAL who gave his life saving Americans in Benghazi. Glenn was the kind of guy who dedicated himself to lifting others up, and that ethos is the backbone of this company. They donate 10% of all profits to charity, starting with the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. And they back up that legacy with standards most companies won't even attempt. No sugar, no fillers, no junk. Third-party tested, NSF certified for sport. If you want to live better longer, Bubs is giving our listeners 20% off for a limited time. Just head to bubsnaturals.com and use the code COMBAT at checkout. And after you order, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please make sure to tell them it was Combat Story. It genuinely supports the show and helps us keep bringing these conversations to you. And now, back to our show.
And I'm like, okay, I have 6 or 8 weeks until the show starts. I know I'm in the finale, but I don't know if I get hired or fired in December.
Okay.
So how do I leverage this? What do I do to increase the impact on whatever's going on? So I did a few things. So kellyperdew.com URL. I bought 3 of the other contestants' URL. I told them the game is still going on. You don't realize what's happening. I'm like, how can you not have your own URL? I gave it to them, but I'm just like, come on, pay attention. I figured out the book deal, right? Found a publisher, structured the book. I had to do all this stuff by myself because I was not allowed to tell anybody except like my agent and whatever, like nothing, like my attorney and right. And I'm like, should I have a cologne? Should I have a clothing line? Should I went through it? Like I'm just like whiteboarding like crazy.
Well, because your mind is going now, right? You're already like
I'm like
they've like lit a fire under you.
And I know I'm kicked ass. Like the first guy was a 6-foot white guy from the Midwest. I'm like, they're probably not picking me. NBC and Trump, they're probably going to pick the woman. Like they're just like by the whatever. That's what I think, right? But it's going to be hard to pick her because I killed it. So anyway, so I went through everything and I came up with 4 or 5 different ways that I thought made a lot of sense. But I decided that no matter what happened, I was going to stay true to the entrepreneurial brand and the military veteran brand. That I wouldn't do anything that would put those in jeopardy. So I did not go judge the Miss Hawaiian Tropic Sun Oil content. I did a whole bunch, in retrospect, maybe not the best. But there were a whole bunch of things that I did not go do. And I did all the stuff that were on brand because I love helping founders build companies. And I wanted to continue in that vein. And it just has naturally become a part of Moonshots Capital, a part of all my angel investments. It was a no-brainer for my co-founder and I to work together. And he's a Henry Crown Fellow. And for that fellowship, you select a project that embodies what you're going to do to make the world better. And his is Moonshots. I mean, both kind of stars align where we're doing both of these things together. And we've been our friend anniversary, January of 2005. He finished his PhD at Columbia. I just won the show. And he was teaching in the social department at West Point. And the dean wanted to invite me back to speak to cadets and faculty because they'd had all this, marketing around me, NBC and everything else.
West Point graduate, wins the Apprentice, right? Absolutely.
I mean, that's what it says on my little chyron for the show every opening night on the number 1 slot, the number 1 show. He'd said that there was a large spike in applications, whatever. He actually said, Kelly, this is a 1 star at the top. I think you did so much more for the military out of it than you ever could have in it.
It's a very general officer compliment.
So Craig drew the short straw to be my handler for the day. So 21 years of friendship now.
Wow.
And, we started investing together in 2011 and formalized Moonshots in 2014.
So, okay, so I've got a lot of questions about Moonshots, and I'm really excited to get there in just a couple of minutes. But can you talk to me about, I would say, a point in your life where, so now this is before you start Moonshots, and this can help segue in, but where you've had a moment in time where your companies or one of the companies that you're invested in, or one of the companies that you're working for or your own, that you noticed that they were in like real trouble. And how did you navigate the waters, to use a naval term, but how did you navigate the waters either to say like, okay, this needs to sun down, or this is what we need to do to fix it? But almost those moments of where it's Friday and payroll's due and you got no money in the bank account. This is post Apprentice.
So, I mean, I do not want to cast the picture of it being super negative, but I'm sure a lot of the audience is familiar with ID.me and Blake Hall. So I was just an angel in Los Angeles that everybody kind of knew was a military vet and liked military vets. And an investor in New York had met Blake when Blake was couch surfing after Harvard, trying to raise money for what is now ID.me. This is 16 years ago. And he said, oh, you should talk to this angel in LA, Kelly Perdew. He's a military vet and he likes military veteran founders. And this is way before Moonshots, right? This is 2010. And I get a call. Sir, this is Blake Hall. Like he's on a Crick 77, like, talking to the commander.
Radio check.
I literally have been here forever. Like over. Roger, over. So
I have you Lima Charlie. You're like, ah.
I remember the day we talked, the first day we talked, and he's compelling, right? And I also have that I'm giving back twice a week going. So I take another call and I end up being more interested. And I'm like, okay, send me the deck. We review it like for fundraising, the deck that he was using to raise money. And I'm like, all right, send me the cap table, which is the structure on who owns the equity in the company and trying to understand for the fundraising process. And I ask him, I'm like, when I look at the cap table, I'm like, Blake, who are these other 3 people on here that have the same amount of equity as you? He's like, oh, those are my co-founders from Harvard. And I'm like, but where are they? They're not on any of the emails. They're not, like, one's not doing marketing. Nobody, like, I don't, why? We've been talking for a month now. I don't know, never heard their names.
Sure.
I said, oh, like, Bob's at McKinsey, Jim's at Goldman, and, Bill went back into the Navy. And I'm like, all right, we have a problem here. That's what's called dead weight on a cap table.
Oh.
And a few problems with this. One, we're not going to be able to raise any money because everybody's going to ask who owns this giant chunk of equity. And 2, you will no longer be friends with them in about a year if you try to make this work because you will be killing yourself. And they won't be. So what you need to do to make this successful is go to talk to each of them, and you need to take all 3 of that giant chunk the 3 of them own, get it down to 5% total. Not 5% each, 5% total, which in the world of startups and Harvard graduates is literally an impossible task. 2 weeks later, sir, ready to go.
How you have you Lima Charlie? Like, again?
Yep. And when he had to get a shared professor for one of them to explain the idea that, 20% of 0 is bad, but 2.5% of a big thing is better. And wow, is it true now? But he did not impossible, but very, very difficult thing to do and was coachable. And that was going to not be a company if he hadn't done that. And then there have been a few pivots along the way because it was called Troop Swap to start, and then Troop ID, and then ID.me. So he's navigated through it, and I have been incredibly, proud, almost like big brothery proud of watching him evolve. And I would say, at least for the last 10 years, I learned way more from him than he does from me. But been a board member, love it, in it for the long haul. And it's publicly, not public knowledge, he raised capital last year at a $2 billion valuation.
Wow. Wow, what an incredible success rate. Again, coming from, and I've got him up here on LinkedIn and I'm looking at his profile, but it's funny, you see these people. I think this is what's so important about having these conversations is what I want to convey to viewers and listeners is accessibility, right? Is saying like that if we were to look at Blake Hall right now and say like ID me $2 billion valuation, well, he must have just always been successful, but or been always whatever. I love the fact that like on his first phone call with you, he's probably like jittering on the other side of the line and been like, yes, sir, kind of. I think that there's a little bit of humanity, of saying that we all suffer from that same kind of, nerves are normal, right? With
Yeah.
people. And I love
I
how
don't,
you're
I
able to
don't,
kind of convey that.
I don't know that Blake Hall has ever been too jittery. So I don't know that that's the exact way to describe it. So have you spoken to him yet?
I have not. I have not.
Okay, that's going in the queue 100%. So he was the most successful hunter-killer platoon leader in Iraq
Really?
and moved from a battalion asset to theater asset,
Really?
to where allies were placing their special operators in to watch and understand and try to figure out how he was killing and capturing the deck of cards. He had the
Yeah,
most
no
kills and
kidding.
captures out of the deck of cards.
Okay.
He
Well,
is a
very much would
beast.
love to talk with him.
He is a beast. Yeah, we'll talk about that after. But he's the epitome of what we want to invest in.
So that brings me to my next question. Okay, so first of all, I love that you do, 30-minute, was it 2 30-minute blocks or 2 15-minute blocks a week?
Two 30-minute blocks I try to do.
For a man of your, your status, right, for how busy that you are, for as much as many places you have your hands, especially managing a family as well, to give up an hour a week is a lot. We do appreciate that. So on the other side, when it comes to a company that is, pitching you and they're looking for, now, like we'll get into the creation of Moonshot in a second, but when you're having a conversation, first 10 minutes, take me through the first 30 seconds, first 10 minutes. What are three things that kind of help shape your perspective of the company or the organization or the people that you're dealing with, whether they be red flags or green flags, as you go through there?
So a fundamental thesis for me in my investment, and Craig for us for Moonshots, has been, yes, the technology can be important, but as we've seen, especially lately, the rate of pace of change of the technology, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the demonstrable, extraordinary leadership chops of that team, of their ability to adjust fire, their ability to continue to learn, strong conviction, loosely held. Like I want them to can't be a know-it-all, but can't give up on what they're fighting for. It's this fine line on each of them, right? Humility, desire to learn, and just I'm going through around over under. There is no wall there, right? This mentality, and a way to get that from a founder and understand is the origin story, right? So why did you start this company? What was your eureka moment? What is your knowledge of the customer base that made you think this is more important? Why are you and your team going to be able to do this in a way that's defensible and creates a moat? Like hearing that story, you can tell if someone calculated in a business school class that this looks like a large market. What should I go do and go ask a bunch of people questions and figure out where they do it? Or if for 3 years they broke their backs trying to do this thing in the industry, they knew all of the distribution channels, they know exactly what needs to be done and who and how to do it. And this new technology or idea or orthogonal approach to solve is going to wipe out the incumbency, right? So those are very different stories when you hear why somebody's doing it. The other piece of it is so difficult to be successful building a startup from scratch. To 0 to 1 is hard, and scaling one, like I was fortunate to be able to have like a 4-hour dinner with Elon. Got to pick the people in the room, and he described it as like, 0 to 1 is hard. 1 to like MVP and getting to where you're actually producing it is another factor harder, but producing at scale, another factor harder. So many problems with doing that, right? So, being able to be curious and humble about what you're going after is super important. But I will find out based on your origin story if there's enough of a reason for you to go through hell basically to make it. Like, it is going to be nearly impossible. And it will be impossible if you don't have the perseverance, and if you don't have the right reason for why you're doing it, you can't get through it. So there's a lot on that origin story that you can pull out of somebody on why they're doing it, how long they'll last. And of course, like on almost all of these, like I just described to you, Blake Hall, $2 billion valuation last year, 2 pivots. Like none of these companies that we invest in early seed stage ever end up where they were aiming. But that's why the founders' leadership capabilities are so important.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Just from a standpoint, yes, you want conviction, and conviction is something that is very hard to replace in people, or to, I would say, replicate when people are trying to drive towards success. But I have met people who confuse conviction with obstinance at some level, and they're unwilling to come off of their, whatever their pillar is.
That's when I say humble, curious, and coachable with strong conviction, right? Like, I'm going to solve this problem. I don't pretend to know everything about it. And I'm willing to learn on how different ways to attack it. And the battlefield changes, the bad guys change. Like it's a fluid environment. So you can't stay stuck.
We've suffered, to harken back to the military and the ecosystem that I, came from recently, is that we understand when studying, Moore's principle, right? And again, the advancement of, microchips, and if we use that as a metaphor for, the advancement of technology and microchips shrinking in size by 50%, and then being able to increase output capacity by 100% every 2 years. If we take that and layer that over, what we found inside of the military procurement process is it generally took 5 years from ideation until implementation. But the challenge was that technology, by the time that the, whatever, gizmo got to the, infantry, Marine, or whatever it is on the ground, after 5 years, it was already irrelevant because technology had moved so much faster and has continued in that rapid advancement since then. And so you're right, having the ability to be agile, I think, quick on your feet, and then being able to come off of a lot of these things is super, super important. I really like that reflexibility, and the ability to take a look at new stimulus as it develops, as the world changes, and say, okay, we can adapt to that, rather than saying this needs to be a square peg in this square hole, and it's the only way it's going to work. So now we take it in Moonshots Capital, right? So you guys come together, and can you take me through the genesis of how this happens? You've already been friends at this point for probably 6 years, it looks like, if I'm mathing in public correctly. So,
Yes.
So start in 2011 was?
Yeah. So I started investing in 2004 as an angel in the LA ecosystem. 2005, January, I met Craig. He's still in the Army. So he did 17 years active duty. I did 3. Between us, we had 1 full retirement.
1 full career.
Exactly.
We are retired military.
Yes. We equate to 1 retired person. And he got out after 17 years to do his first startup, much to the eyebrow raising shock and awe of friends and family who are like, what are you doing? Like, this
you have to believe in what you're doing a lot to leave at 17 years.
I think we calculated he would have to have lived to be like 175 to get the full benefit equal to what his first exit was from that first one. So it was a financially good decision. Turns out.
But man, leaping from that lily pad when there's no other. Woo!
So I casually mentor / advised him on that because I'd been in the ecosystem for a while, but he did that all, he made that decision to do that by himself. The next company that he started, I became a board member of, and the next one, that third one, I helped raise money for angel groups, put money in. I was on the board. That company called Ride Scout that he founded with another military veteran, Joseph Kopser, they sold it to Daimler Mercedes, which is headquartered in Austin. And the reason Craig now lives in Austin, and that's where the headquarters for the fund is. So while he was doing Ride Scout, I was in LA, he was in DC. We would both see really neat deals that we liked in our ecosystems. And so it used to be, this is the kind of 2000, I was doing it from 2004, he was doing it from 2011. You meet a founder, AJ, you're killing it. This is your second company. I know you're going to do it. You know you're going to raise the money, but you're like, hey, Kelly, I like you and Craig. I want you on the cap table. How much can I put you down for? Because I'm raising $5 million. And I say, if I'm running a syndicate, like I'm doing angels, I'm like, well, I'll do 25K or 50K or 100K, and I'll get 10 buddies to get 25K. Whatever. We'll get $250,000. But I don't package them. Back then, you couldn't package them. It was everybody goes on the cap table. But I would call them, tell them I'm doing it, say, stomp my foot, send me your check. Craig was one of my phone calls in DC for deals I saw in LA. He was doing it in DC. He called me for the ones in DC.
I love that.
And we would share deals, and we liked how each other looked at deals. And in 2011, we went to an event in Silicon Valley. Craig and I did, and a bunch of other Academy graduates were invited to this event. And there was somebody from the Air Force and Google Ventures who was giving us a tour of Google. And while we were walking through, Craig and I had been talking about, should we formalize what we're doing with these angel investments? I don't know. And the guy was describing how everything works at Google, and we were walking and showing this amazing research facility and all this stuff. They said, Googlers can spend like 10% of their time on whatever they want. Moonshots. Trying to build moonshots. And I got on GoDaddy and was like, Moonshots Capital, $4.99 a month. I'm like, boom, and there it is, right there. So we started at that point in time running syndicates, and it became legal. Naval from Angel Lists, which is a large platform that allows angels and deals to look at each other and see each other, got a no action letter from the SEC, meaning they won't take an action against you. If you're a lead angel on an investment, you can take fees and carry from the people who invest in the deal without having a broker-dealer license. Normally, you would have to have a broker-dealer license to get paid on fundraising. But because you're the lead angel, they wanted to incentivize investment in high tech. They said, this is an exception. You cannot have a broker-dealer license and still do this. So Craig and I started running syndicates out of Moonshots Capital, and we would write checks from $500,000. Maybe 5 people gave us $100,000 each to invest. We put our own money in every deal, like however much we did, plus everybody else's. But it would be one name on the cap table. Moonshots Capital Syndicate number 4. One person to talk to instead of a bunch of angels bugging you all the time as a founder.
Right. Kind of like the same issue that you had earlier on when you're like, hey, maybe with ID Me, right?
Completely.
Okay.
But it also is good for the angels because the minimum investment might be $100,000, but you can only write a $5,000 check, so you don't get to get into deals. But if we pool the capital, we meet the minimum requirement. It goes on the cap table, and everybody's fine.
It's almost like crowdsourcing from a certain aspect.
Totally. Crowdsourcing by one person or 2 people, whatever. Right? That's what it is. And the most important thing though is getting access to great deals, because you can go on Angel List and you don't know what a good deal is or not. If you're in the ecosystem, you find it.
And these are, so now as you and Craig running Moonshots, you're already having the vetting process, right? So not like you have the filters of decades now of experience in this space of kind of being able to not read the tea leaves, but kind of get a pretty good sense on what's going to be a higher chance of success. And that gives
signals. If I've seen 100 deals, you've seen 3 deals, I know what's a good deal. You may know what a good deal is. You probably don't with only 3 deals, unless one of them happened to be really good. And I know by sector, I see all sorts of stuff, right? You just get so much more information, you can make a better decision. So we did that for 3 years. And the problem with running a syndicate is, okay, you really are a hot founder. I got access to you, AJ. You are going to raise $5 million like that, but you offer me an allocation. If I'm running a syndicate, you say, okay, how much do I put you down for, Kelly? I'm like, somewhere between 500 and 3 million. And you're like, I need to kind of know how much because I have to raise the money. When will you know? And I say somewhere between 2 weeks and 5 weeks because half our people are on vacation or whatever, right? And unless I'm backstopping with my own money, I can't commit. So that was what caused us to raise a committed fund, it's called. So people give us their money up front or commit to give us their money up front without knowing what the deals are, just because of our thesis, how in
And
the flow
effectively
we
now
are
trusting you and
to make the decisions.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but now I can come up to you, AJ, and say, I'm going to invest. I'm leading the round. Here's a term sheet. We'll put 2 of the 5 million in, and I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of people. We'll hopefully get the rest of the money in, plus the people that you know. I will become a board member, talk to these founders like Blake Hall who say, I add value, I'm trustworthy, like all the things that you want. I know how to do stuff that you don't. We have a network that we bring to bear. There's a bunch of different things, right? So
It's so much more continuity, a little bit more security on both ends of the spectrum is what I'm seeing.
for sure. So it enables it to be a full business for us, right? Because we get fees and carry off the committed capital. So, okay, we can have an associate, we can have a budget for traveling, we can make a living out of it. That's functionally what occurs. And we have to return capital, right? So this month, we sold a Fund 2 company called Signal to CrowdStrike for $740 million. That's a big one.
That's
4
a
years.
huge one. That's
Yeah.
a huge one. And then that
Yeah.
and then that structure that breaks down now to the investors that you had into your company, and that helps to kind of waterfall
Right.
out.
So Fund 2 has X number of investors, X amount of money. That sale of the one of the 18 companies that sold will give investors back 65% of their money, about. So 1 or 2 more of those, and everybody's really ecstatic. Everybody's ecstatic now. So the time frames 5 to 7 years to start receiving capital back from a typical VC fund. They're 10-year funds with 2 1-year extensions available, but ID me, I've been, from a first check in 16 years now, so they can take a while. and it depends on what's happened in the marketplace. You can't time IPOs or M&A. It's like, it just depends what's going on. But it is a very high performing asset class, top percentage.
I really like that. And I think that it comes from what I'm sensing here is it just comes from trust, right? Is your just expertise in the field. What I think that when I would talk with young military officers or young, staff non-commissioned officers, sometimes I would say you just need time in. You need to understand this space a little bit more. You need to kind of just live in the experience a little bit more before they can kind of start to get their almost sixth sense of how things are going to go. It seems like at Moonshots Capital, that's what you guys have, is you're bringing that to bear. And so it makes the investors comfortable as well as the people you invest in. It's almost like a bona fides again that you give to a company. If Moonshots is backing, then you're like, hey, we have enough understanding to say that we think that you have a pretty strong chance of being successful. That's really, really cool. Really, really
So
cool.
it's interesting because some venture funds put tiny amounts of money in a lot of companies and affectionately referred to as spray and pray. Like if one of them becomes a Google, it pays like it's a jackpot, and you have a higher likelihood of hitting something if you put it across a lot. Ours is the other end of the spectrum. We write bigger checks into a few deals that we have high conviction on, and then we help. Like we literally roll up our sleeves and help. We introduce customers, we introduce employees, we try to help with business deals, we help with fundraising. And that's a different strategy. So if we have a good performance, which we do, you can be like, oh, you're really good at picking companies. And I'm like, well, we do a whole lot of helping after. So maybe we're pretty good at picking and really good at helping, or we're picking coachable founders who listen. So maybe it's a combination. And I think it depends on the type of VC you're talking about. It depends on when they invest in the life cycle of the company too. Like the later stage investments are almost like PE funds now, right? They're purely structured, mostly financial. Some of them add a lot of value, but a lot of them are strictly, here's $200 million to build or $2 billion to build data centers. How else can we help, right? Like if you're Elon, your seed round for XAI was $6 billion raised on an $18 billion pre-money.
Stratospheric
Right.
levels of
It's a different, like it's an outlier for sure. But the thing you said about trust, I think it's important to touch on because, like I told you, about a third of our companies have military vets as part of the founding team. And one of the things that attracts us so much is, as you know, trusting our sons and daughters in the military in harm's way, that responsibility is sacred, right? And soldiers take that responsibility incredibly seriously, right? We have found that military veterans have that same sense of responsibility about other people's money. So it's not this run and gun, spend it all, away some more, let's go flying off the edge of the cliff at full speed. If we don't make it, we don't make it. It's like a very conscious, and if you talk to somebody like Blake Hall, every day he thinks about like those first checks he got from people who said, okay, this is my daughter's college money, or this, instead of getting it like, and those people who put that money in, it's going really, really well for them right now. But he literally thinks about that.
I love that. And it's like putting the first dollar up, right? Or the first check and saying, to me, I call it like a social contract. It's not just, yes, we are in business to, for the creation of capital at some level, but there still is the human aspect of we are hoping to change lives, one with our product, but two with the potential investments inside of that. That social contract never leaves. And I think that if I may, I think a lot of that comes from what I see as like an act of service, of being in service to one another. And so when you make that social contract with a platoon or a family member of a service member, I like how that carries forward. That's a lot more human, of an element to carry into business. I appreciate that.
And I hope, because where we are in the ecosystem, we invest super early, right? Seed stage. I think that other general partners at funds that are higher up in the food chain, the Series A's, B's, and C's that have a lot deeper pockets, think the same way about us as board members like Craig and I. Like that we do have, it's not just money, right? We're in the founder's corner, like right up to our fiduciary responsibility to our investors. And it's a long game. Like that time with the founder, like I mean, Blake Hall, 16 years. My kids are 16. So I'm married. Like I'm
We're committed.
It's a long-term relationship. So that's how we look at it on the front end for engaging. So
I appreciate that. So, as we start to kind of, wind this conversation down, what I would like to ask is a couple of like rapid fire questions for you associated towards military veterans and their transition from service. What in a quick fire kind of piece, what is something, a character trait, an attribute, whatever it is, that directly relates to the business world from military service? And what is one that hurts with the transition? So one really, really strong advocacy portion and one thing that can be detrimental.
prioritization and time management, like in spades, right? Like it's absolutely applicable. Showing up on time and under budget, making it happen, it's invaluable, right? When you compare yourself to like your civilian counterpart. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying it's built in, right? So you should understand that and value it. I think one of the challenges that I had, and I've seen frequently, there's something in the civilian sector, especially in the tech world, called a creative person that doesn't necessarily think about timelines or structure or throughput or workflow exactly the same way that you might if you're coming out of the military operating like off of an op order, right? For executing. So we can be gruff, abrupt, and we call that a fisher, right? And communicative. And that can sometimes come across as gruff and abrupt. So, thinking about your communication style with different types of people that aren't used to a command structure
Yeah.
is a really important thing to do.
I've had a lot of conversations with people and be like, you're kind of intimidating. Like, I mean, I just said you didn't do your job. You said you were going to do this. You didn't do it, and I said that. I don't know what you soften that up a little bit. Okay, got it. Okay, so now imagine I'm AJ Pasciuti. I am an infantry captain after serving 4 years in the United States Army, and I'm 90 days from getting out of the service. What are your do's and don'ts for me?
My don't is don't wait till it's 90 days for getting out of the service. So you kind of know way before that. I would say a year is a good time to start thinking and planning, right? Assessing your resources, a lot of introspection on what really excites you or floats your boat. Where are you going to find a purpose? Because I think that's one of the biggest dynamics that isn't really explained to soldiers, military vets getting out, thinking they're going to have a purpose that's similar. I don't want to say impossible to find, but you can't set the expectation that you're going to feel the same amount of purpose. You can, I think, with reindustrialization and all the stuff that's going on in tech, I know mostly about the tech world, right? So all the stuff that's if you can get into an Anduril or it's real easy to make that transition, right? But really having a lot of introspection on what's important to you, what we talked about at the beginning, the curiosity and learning. A year out, doing the outreaches, to do the informational interviews, to start thinking about where can I fit, what is going to be exciting, what's going to provide the most amount of optionality for me, what is the name of a role even that makes sense, do I have interest across finance or marketing or just operations, like I really like making the trains run, like knowing that about yourself and then starting to do the informational interviews with people like me, people like you, like people who have been out for a while in those roles and then at 6 months is when you start really targeting. And then you got the geography, and you got the amount of money you want to make, and then you got to define what risk means to you. Like all of those pieces are really important. We, my partner, Craig Cummings, actually wrote an article about how to treat yourself like a startup. You have to be able to explain yourself like a startup when you're transitioning out of the military. It's on our blog called Leadership Prevails on Medium. But it's a really useful article because we had so many people come at us asking and talking about this that we decided to write it up in a way that was usable for somebody going through it. But so 90 days, you're starting off behind the 8 ball. 12 months when you're starting to think about it, 6 months at the latest. And then start doing all those informational interviews and start overlapping your network with geography, with what you're interested in and targeting.
No, I love that. I love that. So when it comes to conversations, I think that, or advocating for themselves, I think veterans, in my personal opinion, I think veterans are not super great at advocating some of their skill sets. I think that personally as a Marine, it was almost like beaten into us that, we are a team and that, one person is additive to the team, but not the sole member of that. Do you find that veterans can be almost too self-deprecating or too potentially self-limiting with talking about themselves and their attributes when entering into a job market within their first, year of leaving service, or are there ways to help, better that process for them?
I would not characterize military veterans as self-deprecating as much as I would call it just ignorant. Like, you need to understand exactly the value of what you've done numerically. dollar value of equipment, number of people, sphere of control. And you need to do the research and the work to understand how to translate everything that you've done into civilian business terms. And if you just lay that out, it's not boasting, it's just factual, right? And I don't believe it's somebody's trying not to say what they did. It's not understanding how to translate it into business ease, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
No, it totally does make sense. I really
And
appreciate that.
I think that LLMs now should be able to do that in like an instant, right?
They can.
Certainly first drafts, and then work with somebody to see what that, because you're by definition not familiar with the business world vernacular, so you can't check it. So you got to, do these square? Does this look good?
I was working when I was getting ready to retire. I was working with on base. There was a resume builder, fantastic guy. But I was like, how do I convey being a scout sniper, right? Like like nobody needs that in the business world, And he's like, okay, he's helping to kind of reframe the other aspects that I normally didn't think about, that came involved with being a scout sniper and all the ways that it helps outside operationally, team logistics, that kind of stuff. So you're right, putting it into the different language. Okay. My final question for you is, when it's all said and done, right? What do you want people to say that you've built, right? And then how you built it, about your career, your legacy, and then about how that can kind of help them. What do you want people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, my like service DNA. When I got out, it was a thoughtful process, and what attracted me so much to being an entrepreneur and then helping entrepreneurs is I honestly believe and see mathematically that the lifeblood of the United States is that entrepreneurial drive and that entrepreneurial spirit, and that build out is what can save us from everything. It's the reason most people want to come to the United States, right? To being able to create something, have that opportunity to build out. And I think supporting that, especially, I think the focus on leadership makes sense because the performance is there. But I'm never investing in a military veteran because I feel bad or any charitable element, and we don't raise money that way for ourselves. This is about, if you want the highest performance, you're going to get the best leader you possibly can in every position that you need them in. And guess what? Military vets are probably going to be at the top of all those positions.
I appreciate that. And that makes a lot more sense. Again, understanding who we are, our value proposition of what we bring to an organization, and then being able to advocate for that, themselves. So, I mean, with that, I really want to thank you for coming on the show today and just talking with us on this. As always, you're super welcome to come back as much as and as often as you like. I'm going to school at University of San Diego now for a PhD in leadership. And it's interesting because the leadership continuum is kind of nebulous at times, but I think what I really nebulous is a very choice word in that one.
So
But I think
one quick anecdote on that. So as part of writing the book that I wrote on leadership after The Apprentice, I'm like, who am I? Like, I was a junior officer and I got out. I hadn't built any real big companies yet. How do I know if it really applies to business? So I'm like, I need to have real experts, military people who transition to business and that billion dollar companies, validate that these principles are important. And I talked to like Ross Perot, Roger Staubach, Bill Coleman from BEA Systems, all these people, right? And got validation and weaved their stories into the chapters of all the leadership principles in my book. But the one that you just reminded me of was when I walked into Pete Dawkins' office at Citi in New York City, sat down in this giant, building and the giant thing, and there's Pete Dawkins, who, Heisman Trophy, Army football general, like just unbelievable guy, right? And I'm like, here's what I think leadership. He goes, Kelly, I've been studying leadership for 40 years. I give every new employee in the company during when the 500 of them come every 6 months that they're bringing on into the company. I describe leadership to them at the conference. Like that's what I do. And he's got like 200 leadership books on the wall behind me. He goes, let me tell you, it's this simple. And I've got my little recording device out and like I'm listening. And he's like, leadership is the ability to motivate others to action. Full stop.
That's period. End the sentence.
Carrot, stick, good ways, bad ways, evil, nice, not, like that is it, period. End of story. So I don't want to like shorten your PhD. I'm just like, that. That's what the guy, the leadership guy, like stopped me. I said, well, I still need to publish the book and like,
yeah.
put some more stuff in there. So
I think a lot of people argue of how we get there, right? And that's what's been really fun about the study of it, right? Is recognizing that it's a discipline that everybody has kind of an opinion on, but also the way that I talk about is everybody's had a bad leader. And so we're trying to be able to, capture, the goods and bads in that. And I also believe that there's no such thing as like a one size fits all, but I love the idea of this is the end state. It's motivating people to action. And it's as simple as that. And people really try to overcomplicate the crap out of it when it doesn't necessarily need it a lot of times. So with that, I want to thank you again, Kelly Perdew, for coming on the show. How can people contact you? And I do this like limiting, but contact, reach out, find your website, your book, if you can tell us a little bit about those places, we'll be, of course, put those in our links as well.
Sure. Moonshotscapital.com is our fund. And I'm on X. I almost said Twitter. I'm on X. You can find me pretty easily with my name on X. LinkedIn is pretty overcrowded, but I do put a lot of information out on LinkedIn, and our blog is called Leadership Prevails on Medium. So there's a lot of different ways to access us.
I'm loving that. Looking at Leadership Prevails right now, really cool. I can't wait to kind of dig down these things and then maybe bring some of these things to my classes that I have on Mondays and Thursdays down in San Diego.
Awesome.
But with that, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been absolutely a pleasure, and we hope to have you back as we continue to help veterans transition into leadership roles in the civilian space itself.
You're doing great work, AJ. Thanks a lot.